Today, Michael Saylor explains why his company will never stop buying Bitcoin, and Anthony Pompliano has some advice for young crypto investors. Welcome to CNBC's Crypto World, on location at the 2022 North American Bitcoin Conference. I'm Tanea McKeel. Let's first catch you up on the latest price moves. Cryptocurrencies are higher today after spending most of the week in the red. Prices gained an average of 1% by 12:30 Eastern. Bitcoin rose by 0.5%. Ether gained 2.25%, and Solana was down by 2%. Other smart contract platform tokens were down slightly as well. While we're here in Miami, Crypto World caught up with Anthony Pompliano of Pomp Investments to talk about the state of crypto. He had some advice for young investors.
Whenever this question comes up, there's three components that I think about. The first is it an inflation hedge? Is it a safe haven asset? And is it correlated or not? And I always say that the longer of a timeline you look at, the more confidence you can have in the data. So if you just look at the last day, well, maybe it looks good, maybe it doesn't, I don't know, but like, is the trend gonna continue or not? You just don't have that much data. So if you look over a really, really long time period, what you find is that Bitcoin is a non-correlated asset, that it has been a fantastic safe haven, and it has served as an inflation hedge. But the thing that people don't realize about inflation is that if you use that as kind of one aspect, investors don't wait for the inflation to show up to move their assets. They say to themselves, okay, I see what the Fed's doing, I see what the fiscal policies are, I believe inflation's gonna happen. If I think it's going to happen, whether it occurs or not, I've psychologically told myself it's gonna happen, I move my money. And I move into what I see as an inflation hedge asset. And the reason I do that is because if I'm wrong, then it's not that bad of a situation. If I'm right and inflation does occur, I better have moved my assets. I better not wait for the inflation to come. And so if you go back and you look, all through 2020, inflation was actually pretty low. And even into the beginning of 2021, we still didn't have that high of inflation. But what we did have was Paul Tudor Jones, Stanley Druckenmiller, a bunch of financial institutions, all the capital moving on chain, where people were saying, I'm going to front run the inflation. And then inflation came, and we've now had, 8-9 months of over 5% inflation. We've got the highest inflation in 40 years. And everyone's like, well, Bitcoin isn't going to the moon. It's like, no, because people already moved their assets and they're protected from that inflation. And so in 2021, Bitcoin was up, I think it was 60-65%. Most other assets were only up 20 or 30%, which was a banner year for real estate or for the stock market, whatever. But Bitcoin being up so much was because people were anticipating the inflation that ultimately did come. Look, I think there's a lot of young people who are very interested in cryptocurrencies in general, right? And Bitcoin is kind of that insertion point into the industry. And what I tell all of them is stop, think, and learn. Before you go and you start spending money all these different places or think that you're going to become, some great entrepreneur or something, you may do that. But learning is so important. And I think what we've seen is that Bitcoin is a great teacher. It teaches you everything from economics to computer science to security, open source software, all these different things. And if you're a young person today, I always say, think like an investor. You are going to make an investment of the single most important asset you have. You don't have a lot of money, but you have time. And if you have time and you're going to invest it in something, think like an investor. And that time investment in Bitcoin is likely to be a great investment because you have intellectual capital flowing into the space, you have financial capital flowing into the space, and what we've seen is that the growth rates of these are very attractive. And so I think that that's just a huge piece across America and globally, is we need as many of our young people who are talented to come into the industry, learn, and then turn around and ask, what can I do to help push this forward? And the more people we get asking that question and acting on it, I think the better off we'll be over the long term.
For our main story, Crypto World's MacKenzie Sigalos sat down with MicroStrategy CEO Michael Saylor yesterday, right after his panel with Cathie Wood. Saylor talked about the company spending hundreds of millions of dollars on Bitcoin, his outlook for regulation, and more. Take a listen.
So we had Cathie Wood on the show today, and you were on a panel with her this morning, and you unequivocally said, do not sell your Bitcoin. So what is your outlook for the market?
My outlook is very long term, and the reason I say do not sell your Bitcoin is because if I look back at my life as an investor, the things that I regret are when I found a really good idea and I underinvested in it. Like Google was a good idea, Facebook was a good idea, Apple was a good idea, Amazon was a good idea. A digital monopoly that changes the world for 1 billion people is a good idea. And yet, the most common two mistakes after finding a good idea is, first mistake is someone says something, they talk crap about your idea, there's FUD, oh, Australia's going to tax Google, or somebody's going to Amazon's going to get regulated, or something will happen, and so people panic sell. And so whenever there's anxiety in the market and you panic sell and then you never buy back in, you regret that. And the second thing you always regret is you wish you bought more. It's a very simple idea. Take the money you want to give to your grandchildren, convert it to Bitcoin, put it in cold storage and wait. Let the rest of the world do the work, and you'll be the beneficiary of all the intelligent people, no matter where they might be in the world. You'll be the beneficiary of all their work with doing nothing else. There's only one mistake you can make. And the mistake you can make is study the world, get anxiety about something going on somewhere in the world, and sell your Bitcoin.
You basically wrote the corporate handbook on adding Bitcoin to your balance sheet and taking that approach. You just borrowed fiat cash against using your Bitcoin as collateral, $205 million to buy more Bitcoin. Is this what all companies should be doing now in whatever way they're able to allocate funds in that direction?
We want to set an example for corporations, and so Bitcoin is pristine collateral. It's theoretically the ideal collateral against which to take a loan. And so we felt that by us doing this deal with Silvergate Bank, it would make other banks either jealous or comfortable, and hopefully we'll see an entire Bitcoin banking sector evolve. And we want to support Silvergate Bank, as they move into this space. We set up a credit line, we borrow against it, we do it responsibly. We have $5 billion in collateral, we borrowed $200 million. So I'm not telling people to go out and take a highly leveraged loan. What I am doing, I think, is doing my best to lead the way and to normalize the Bitcoin-backed financing industry. And I think the corporate beneficiaries will be the Bitcoin miners. We're not the only ones with a Silvergate credit line. Marathon did a credit line with Silvergate Bank against their Bitcoin. So there's 24 publicly traded Bitcoin miners around now. And so I think there should be dozens and dozens of publicly traded companies that are doing this.
When do you stop buying Bitcoin from MicroStrategy? Never.
No, I tell people we will be buying Bitcoin at the top forever. I'm not trying to time the market. I don't intend to stop. You could think of MicroStrategy as we're kind of like your non-existent spot ETF.
Yeah.
If there was a spot ETF, you'd be paying 1% fee, and it would be not leveraged. With MicroStrategy, we have a software company that generates cash flow, and so we convert our cash flows into Bitcoin, and so we don't charge you a fee, we give you a yield, and between the cash flows from the software company and just a little bit of leverage that we can take via things like the Silvergate loan, we can give you a spot ETF that generates a 4 or 5% tax-deferred yield. And that's kind of an exciting thing. And when will we stop? Well, why would we ever stop? Well, we'll just keep accreting. It should get exponentially more expensive to buy the Bitcoin, but that's okay.
Today you said that the executive order from Biden a few weeks ago essentially gave the green light to Bitcoin. So are you feeling pretty optimistic about where we're headed in terms of regulation?
Yeah, I don't think it could have been better than that. Never in 100 years did the executive branch ever endorse an asset class. When commodity index came out, the executive branch didn't say figure out the commodities index. When John Bogle evangelized the Vanguard 500, the president didn't say every American and every agency should study the Vanguard 500 and indexing of equities, right? The last time the executive branch had something to say about asset class was the gold edict back in 1933, right? So I feel like we've got really good support from the administration. I think the regulators are progressive and very erudite. When Jerome Powell, Janet Yellen, Gary Gensler have been asked about this, they say, look, it's a store of value asset, it's speculative. If people want to speculate, they can. It's not a currency. Here's the big idea, MacKenzie, which is for a year, I've been in rooms with trillions and trillions of dollars. And it's like the Ray Dalio comment, the Jamie Dimon comment. It's something like this. it seems engineered perfectly. It's obviously better than gold. It's obviously better than all the other ideas we have. It's too perfect. It's too good to be true, and so I think someone's going to ban it. And that's not uncommon. People with large sums of money that are buying fixed income or buying equity index are like, yeah, it sounds really good on paper, but it must be too good to be true. Nobody's going to let that around. And so how do you answer that criticism when someone says it's too good to be true? And it is too good to be true. It's like perfect money. It's a perfect gold with none of the defects of gold, and it's a big tech monopoly with none of the exposure that Google, Facebook, Apple, and Amazon have, because they have people and they do things. And so I wanted something better than a big tech monopoly, and I want something better than gold, and so I have Bitcoin. It's too good to be true. Someone's going to ban it. And the single best way to refute that is say, well, this is what the President of the United States has said. Whereas 40 million Americans want this, I direct you to figure out how to bring it in the public policy framework.
That's it for Crypto World this week. We spoke to a ton more people at Bitcoin 2022, and we're going to be sharing those interviews over at cnbc.com/cryptoworld. So be sure to take a look. We'll be back on Monday, and we'll see you then.